Welcome, movie fans. Thanks for joining us for episode 105 of Reading Between the Reels, the premier podcast of 2003 pop music appreciation. If you're a new listener, we're so glad you found us. If you've been enjoying the show, please subscribe and review us on iTunes or Spotify. You can also support the show by posting on your socials and joining our Facebook group. I'm Craig Dickinson, and I'm joined by Corey Heitschmidt. We're trying to get Justin here. He's having some computer issues. Hopefully he'll join us a little bit later in the show. But Corey, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I was looking forward to this is the reuniting of the three podcasters here. I'm telling you what, I haven't been this excited since Toby, Andrew, and Tom all got together for Spider-Man No Way Home.
Nice. I'm doing good tonight as well. The last few episodes I've been telling you guys about my Magic Mind journey, and I'm just a little bit over 2 weeks in, and the effects continue to build on each other, and I just feel a little bit sharper every single day. Because, Magic Mind, it's not a quick fix. It's a lasting solution to feeling mentally sharp and less stressed, so you can get more done. Magic Mind uses only the highest grades of its ingredients and is filled with mushroom nootropics, adaptogens, and over 100% of your daily vitamins C and D. And thanks to Magic Mind, you have a limited offer you can use now that gets you up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off one-time purchases with code RBTR20 at checkout. You can claim it at magicmind.com/RBTR20. Try it for a week. If it doesn't work for you, they'll refund your purchase within 100 days, no questions asked. And so, Corey, let's go into our more recent segment we've started. What have you been watching this week?
This week, I'll tell you what, I'm still working on my Star Trek Next Generation. I just love Picard, love Data. I'm on season 4, wrapping up season 4, so the Borg are about to come in. And then the other part is the show that my wife and I watch every night is Reba, TV sitcom.
Nice. Yep.
I love Van in that show.
Oh,
and
gosh.
I'm looking forward to seeing. She's got a new show that came out, and it's got a couple of the same characters. So I'm expecting some cameos because why not? But that was another good sitcom that ended way too soon.
Yeah, I've seen most of that. I remember when that was on. We watched most of that.
Greg, what are you watching?
We're still working our ways through the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and so we most recently watched the fourth one, On Stranger Tides, and it was only the second time that I'd seen it, and I enjoyed it. I'm like, it's completely over the top and ridiculous, but after watching the other three like pretty closely right before this one, they're all kind of that, and I don't think it really strays that far off the formula. So I enjoyed it quite a bit.
And I think that's the key to those movies is when you realize that's the pirate lifestyle is way over the top, exaggerated stories. I mean, the one guy tells the story about Jack Sparrow escaping by roping his back hair on sea turtles. Yes. Like that's what you expect in a pirate tale. That's the success of that story.
Yeah, and I thought that they did a really good job explaining why Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley aren't in it. It's not their story. Like their story was very neatly wrapped up in the third one, and this really is very much about it. There's a little kind of that coda at the end of the third movie where he loses the Black Pearl and he has the map and stuff. And so it is really his story. And so it made sense that they're not in this. I think it would have felt kind of artificial for them to actually be in this film.
Yeah.
So we watched that. And then I recently watched Trap, the new M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Ooh, I love him.
And I'm a fan of his as well. I thought it was pretty mediocre, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The biggest thing for me was like, it turns out that the whole concert is staged as a trap for Josh Hartnett's character, but I think you probably could have extended that a little bit more.
Yeah. And
not told us in the trailer that was what was going on. But I think but really just the first half of the movie is pretty tense and pretty well done, and then and I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't seen it. Just recently, it's on Max now.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of people who haven't seen it yet, but the first half is really tense, and then after that, I think it just kind of outstays its welcome a little bit.
I think that's the thing with M. Night is now he's kind of can he pull off what he did with Sixth Sense? It's just I don't know if you can. Every time you watch a show of his now, you're like trying to predict where it's going before it gets there.
Yeah. And I really liked, I know a lot of people didn't like Glass, but I did. I enjoyed that as a kind of capper of the trilogy that started with Unbreakable, and then they put Split in there as kind of a side sequel type of thing. And I enjoyed Glass. Glass worked for me, so I've been a fan of his for a while. But that particular one, like I gave it a chance. Like I said, I enjoyed a lot of it, but then it just kind of went off the rails a little bit. So,
yeah.
But we're not talking about that tonight. What we are talking about,
yes,
is Daredevil from 2003. So, Corey, tell me about your overall thoughts on Daredevil. How many times had you seen it? Which version did you watch? Let's get into that.
So I watched it when it came out back then. I remember seeing it in the theaters. I was good. I was like, oh, it's a good movie. I had no idea. This is right off the heels of Spider-Man, and it was a great movie. Ben Affleck, I loved him. And it was good. But I tell you what, when I saw this was on the list, and I knew I was going to watch it. And then Craig, you had me watch the director's cut, not the theater cut. And it makes me wonder, why do we not just release director's cuts and the theater? Because forget theater cuts. These studio executives need to get out of the way, because when you do, you get a real story, a better story, deeper fights. This was an R-rated versus a PG-13, and okay, it's a little bit more fighting, a little bit more gory, a little bit more, there's blood's a little bit more real in this. So it's grittier, but that's what made this story great. And I'll tell you what else, just going back to Blade, a short origin story is the key thing to go with these for me. This was quick. We get a quick little origin story. It takes about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Bam, we're straight into action and going. It's a flashback telling of how he got his powers, not, okay, give me a 90-minute story and then 10-minute wrap up with, I'm Daredevil, And so I think that's great. And then I think this director's cut, the bar fight that he has, is gritty and super and better. I think there's some extending in this. I don't remember this scene going quite as far. And it makes me wonder, Ben Affleck may have the two best gritty superhero fights on camera. Batman versus Superman, I will always say that is the number one best comic book hero fight of all time in the warehouse. And then this one is right up there, just underneath that, because it was so good.
Yeah, that was my feeling as well. And my first time watching it this time, I was like, no, this is as good as the warehouse fight. I don't know if and then we watched them back to back at lunch, Justin and I did, and then I was like, no, I don't know if I can quite say that, but I do really, really like it, and it's absolutely an improvement over the theatrical cut version, as is the entire film. The director's cut, guys, if you haven't seen the director's cut, do yourself a favor and watch that. If you've only seen the theatrical cut, I know this sounds like a cliche, but you really haven't seen the movie. And I watched both versions for this one. I hadn't seen the theatrical cut in a while, because after the director's cut came out, I was like, this is the only one I want to watch. So I watched the theatrical cut and was like, this is a good film. I enjoy this film. But I'm also going, okay, this feels a little bit off. I feel like I'm missing some things. A lot of the scenes are a little bit shorter. That's what the main thing you see with the director's cut, rather, is that a lot of these scenes are just extended. Not to mention the whole subplot with Coolio in it, and all of this thing. You get to see him be an investigator and actually in court and doing all these things. So I watched that, and then I watched the director's cut, like I said, this time with the director's commentary on, with writer-director Mark Steven Johnson and Avi Arad, who used to run Marvel. And just got a lot of insights into that. There's a documentary on that version, too, that talks about the decision to go. The producers actually are the ones that went with the decision to go with the shorter version. And I know the studio was pushing for a shorter version, but even there's one guy, I don't remember which guy it was, he was like, yeah, I'm happy we went with the theatrical cut. That's the one that I still feel is the stronger one. I'm like, dude, you're wrong.
You're
the
wrong.
One is so much better. And yeah, I know, like, also the rating might have been a thing. You probably would have had to change some things, because they were probably still aiming for PG-13. Just because, for financing, and it's Marvel, they're still trying to make it a family-friendly brand. But yeah, to me, it's at least on par with BVS theatrical versus the Ultimate Cut. Maybe even as big a difference as the Snyder Cut is versus theatrical Justice League. Like, it is so much better,
night and day. And I think that's the part about this that you look at is Early 2000s, late 90s, I think we were all thinking movies had to be under 2 hours, right? It was 2 hours was a long time in the theater. Titanic broke the mold and told you. Avatar broke the mold and told you, hey, you can be in the theater longer. And now we're getting, I mean, what was Avengers Endgame? 2.5 hours?
Yeah, that was close to 3, right?
Yeah, it was close to 3 hours. And so it's like we're conditioned here. We're ready. We can take a little bit of a longer story and get us the better scenes, and instead of saying, well, this kind of works as a transition, we'll put it in there so we can knock off 15 minutes. Give us a longer runtime. Give us a shorter origin story. Give us more action. Give us more into the superhero style building up. There are definitely some scenes in here that I was like, okay, Elektra going ninja mode on some sandbags, that's kind of unnecessary, but, you know. What? Oh, come on, good. Craig, that part.
So good.
Come on. Well, it didn't work for her. She died. I mean, I'm just saying. Spoiler alert. Sorry.
Well, she was fighting, fighting Bullseye. Yeah. So a couple other things I just want to just drop in here before we get into the cinematography and whatnot is a couple of bits of trivia that came out of this was that this is the first Marvel logo that actually has the comic pages flipping, the audio part of that. And Avi Arad pointed that out. And then, or the two of them did during the commentary. And this is also, I believe, the first mid-credit scene in the theatrical cut, where you get to see what happened with Bullseye. It's in the actual film in the director's cut.
Yeah, where he throws the syringe and stabs the fly, so you know he's back.
Yeah,
which I thought was good because I thought he died.
Yeah,
when he hit the car, I don't know how you would not have, but I remember thinking. When I watched it, I was like, oh, yeah, he's dead. Because I forgot all about that mid-credit scene. I forgot this whole plot of this movie. So when I watched it, it felt like a first-time movie to me. I didn't remember any of this.
Yeah. And the one other thing I just want to point out before we get into that stuff is that we've been talking about this through this whole series, that we wanted to watch it through the lenses as if this was the MCU, as if all these things existed in the same universe. And what I found was interesting is that there was a quote from Avi Arad, who I'm going to mention a lot. He's the former CEO of Marvel, who was responsible for a lot of, like, the MCU as it exists now. Like, that's kind of was his baby to begin with. Is that he talks about these films as if they are all part of the same thing, because they're all under the Marvel banner, even though they're distributed by different studios. He said when this film came out, we're 5 for 5 with record-breaking box office successes. With Blade, X-Men, Blade 2, then Spider-Man, and then he's like, and we have 2 more Marvel releases slated for the summer, and he's talking about X2 and Hulk. So it really is very much all under this umbrella. These are all Marvel films, and they all coexist as one united brand, even if the characters aren't crossing over. So pretty exciting time to be, like, revisiting, like, having lived through it and not really know what's coming up. I kind of feel like I'm kind of living vicariously through my past self in a way.
It kind of is. And I tell you, knowing how the MCU has taken off now and how studios now are just saying, we got to find a way to get connections through all these films. If that same mentality existed then, this would have made a great crossover into Tobey Maguire with Spider-Man, I think. Ben Affleck and Tobey Maguire. I wouldn't mind have seen these two characters on screen together.
Yeah.
I think that would have been great. So
yeah, they absolutely could have worked. I mean, I've talked about this before on the show, that my favorite Spider-Man, and really kind of my reintroduction to Spider-Man was the animated show from the late 90s that was on Fox Afternoons. And that had a lot of cameos from other heroes. And that's where I met Daredevil for the first time. I didn't know about that character. I had not read the comic. And so I've seen them interact. And so it would have been very natural to have seen the cinematic versions interact as well.
Yeah.
So, Corey, let's go ahead and jump in before we take too much longer to get into images. So composition, color, camera work, the cinematography of this film. What kind of things stood out to you?
Well, a couple things. One, I really like the projection for how Daredevil sees things and how they do the radar. I think this blue light, this echo, you've seen waves pass through, and it kind of projects, because it gives you an insight. I mean, we know he's blind, but I want to see how he's seeing and how he's interpreting it. So I think they do a fantastic job with the color of it and the way they build it. Now, that's early 2003 CGI.
Yeah.
But especially with, like, the way the bullet travels when Bullseye gets his hand shot and you see the bullet creating ripples through the air. And then when Bullseye throws a ninja star at him and misses for the first time, and he's like, I missed, can't believe it. But the way that ninja star was traveling. So just some of those things were absolutely incredible how they did. And then the one part about color camera work that really stood out to me, because then I just got engrossed in the story, Craig, like you, I just cannot keep my mind on multiple things at one time. The final boxing match for his dad, where the guy comes in and tells him to take a dive, is one, it's always shadowy. It's always not enough light in the room. It's dark. But the guy greets him, and he knows who he is, and he walks into the dark and then says, about his son, and he needs to take a dive. And he's telling him, but he's in the dark when he says it. And then he walks into the light at the end and makes a comment. So in my mind, it was very intentional. Like, I'm greeting you. You know who I am. I'm walking into the shadow because now it's the dark time. And then I walk out of the shadow to say something about, what you need to do. So it was very intentional. I thought it just kind of the light and the dark and showing that a little bit and making you sure that you knew this guy's the bad guy. So.
Yeah. And, just got to build off what you said about the vision, so to speak, the way Daredevil, the radar thing, the sonar thing, rather. That I don't want to tear it down because it's a great series. But we talked a little bit off mic about the Netflix Daredevil series that you haven't seen yet, but you should. It's really good.
I have not seen any of it.
They don't do anything remotely that cool, in my opinion, for how Daredevil quote unquote sees. Because to me, that's the bar. That's where it should be.
That's where it should be. See, I'm going into Daredevil, never seen it. I'm going in blind, you could say. But to go see the TV show finally. But I think they do a great job with that here, and so
which I should mention too. I don't know where else to mention it, but Tom Sullivan was the blind consultant on this. So a lot of the things that you see Matt Murdock doing are things that authentically blind people do. So I love the attention to detail and that kind of stuff. And which leads me into the first thing that I noticed image-wise is that I still think it's a really interesting opening credit sequence where you have the braille being pulled out of the skyscraper windows and then kind of translating into the credits of the names. I think that's just fascinating. Just a really cool way to introduce who this character is, who's not a super mainstream character. And then you have this great opening pan up the front of the church. And then you have these little flashes interspersed, the preceding fights. It's all leading up to, because this whole story is basically told in flashback, like you alluded to. And then you have this iconic shot, Daredevil draped over the cross on the church's steeple, and it's lifted directly from one of the covers of Guardian Devil. Oh. It's just this iconic image, and Mark Steven Johnson, again, he's talking in the commentary, which is fantastic. If you like this film, listen to the commentary. It's great. He was, in a lot of ways, like Zack Snyder has done now, where it's like, I just want to duplicate that shot.
That's fantastic.
So I love that. There's also,
and you see that twice, by the way. That's the beginning opening shot.
Yep.
And then at the end, right before he fights Bullseye for the last time, we catch up to that opening shot.
Yep. And it pulls us right back there. Yeah. And this is what we were. There's also, and I know this is a thing some people don't like. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but there's at least 3 transitions from eyes into other eyes. Like from the beginning, you have adult Matt, like when he gets his mask taken off by the priest, it goes from adult Matt to kid Matt. You have Mary in the stained glass, where you have this sweeping shot goes into the throughout the city and then ends on Mary, and then it goes to Matt waking up in the sensor deprivation tank. And then there's another one where it's Matt's glasses, and then you can see in those glasses there's him, the suit up montage, like one of the first ones we have there. So some interesting things I think with that. Obviously you mentioned the sight. That was kind of the next thing I had. Lots of Dutch angles. I'm always a fan of that, especially when Father Everett, the priest, comes in at the beginning, and a lot of it's also in first person too, because it's Matt's, he's laying on the ground and he's looking that way and he sees the priest come through the door.
Yep. I also thought, just for color and composition, I loved how this has a gritty, dirty, not polished feel on some things. Like I felt like the brick, the streets, early in the movie, especially with his father, everything was dark and gritty. The brick, and it was not polished. It was not clean. And so I feel like that's good because it gives it a little bit of texture, makes you realize, it's a little bit darker tale than sometimes the nice, polished, clean, fancy Stark Industry Tower type thing, which is all top of the line stuff, Yeah. So it kind of shows it's just a guy down in the slums of people, which is why they call it Hell's Kitchen. So versus, the fancier, richer area.
Yeah, that's true, especially coming right after Spider-Man, which we talked about. A lot of it's during the day. A lot of it's very clean, bright. This is not that. It's a little bit more desaturated. A little bit more like along the lines of like a Zack Snyder film, perhaps.
Could be.
So let's go ahead and move down to sound. So sound effects, which I think is big in this. Soundtrack, which I want to talk about a lot. And vocal sound. So, Corey, what are some of your observations on sound?
I love how there's a strong increase in sounds that are oriented with Daredevil. Like you really get some isolated, elevated sounds of small anything. Like when he squeezes the rose of it that's on his father in the alley, and they emphasize that crinkling sound. Footsteps of Kingpin getting out of the truck or out of the car. Voices that gets isolated. Hearing some background noises that he was always attuned to. So they really go through and focus on some of those things to kind of elevate his view, his take, and his person. And if you think of those two shots, we're getting a flashback of all this, and it's his view, it's his take on everything. Because from the opening shot where he's on the cross of the church to the end, where we finally catch up to it, it's like this is kind of a thinking back to that moment. So I feel like it was really nice to get a lot of emphasis on what Daredevil sees, on what Daredevil hears, and how those things affect him. So,
yeah, I think that this film really uses like the Doppler effect really, really well to very much kind of mimic, the way that sonar thing that we talked about before, where things have a definite like physical location based on their sound. And I think specifically about that first scene where he wakes up in the hospital and like that exploding drop sound, right? When in the IV. And what I love about this too, and this is again a character that not a lot of people know, is like when that church bell rings is the first. It's like almost like a tuning fork where everything kind of calms it down. And so the symbolism of that too, with Matt Murdock being a Catholic, I think is fascinating. That's the thing that calms him.
I'll also go to the Jennifer Garner's face in the rain, which was very Matrix style. But like in that whole scene, it's all romantic, including the slow plucking of some string instrument. I don't even know what it is. They're plucking it on the rooftop right before it rains, and there's some cheesy lines. Oh, we can't go now. It's going to rain. It's like, and then you got a kiss that gets interrupted by a call to action because now all of a sudden he hears everything going on. Some mugger in the street, he's got to go. And by the way, he's a quick changer because he automatically was just ready to go. And so it just was, the whole sound in that scene with the instrument was very much like we just switched to a little bit of a love story and kind of build that up and then zoom back to call to action. So.
Yeah, which is, that's another interesting thing too about, again, I'm just going to keep talking about the director's cut versus the theatrical cut, is that rooftop scene is completely different in the way that it ends in the director's cut.
I don't remember that.
In the theatrical cut, she's like, stay, and he's like, no, I got to go. And she's like, stay, and then he does, and they go back and they make love and all this stuff. In the director's cut, he leaves and goes, and so what's brilliant about this too, and then this is another thing that shows up in the commentary, is that later on when they meet up again at the hotel at the banquet or whatever, the ball, the black and white ball, the context of that scene is completely different. It's exactly the same scene, but one is like, hey, I haven't seen you since yesterday, and like it's good to see you again. To, I'm sorry, I messed up, and I hope I get another chance. But you can read it both ways. Yeah, which is fascinating. But as for the soundtrack, I think.
Let's talk about the soundtrack, Craig.
Well, first off, I want to talk about just like the orchestral stuff. So what Graham Revell does the orchestra stuff, and I think the Daredevil theme is good, but not memorable. If that makes sense, it's not something I could hum. It's fine.
No,
but the big thing with this is the pop music, right?
Yes.
Like it is the most, and that's what I mentioned kind of in the intro. It is the most 2003 soundtrack you could possibly get.
Okay. when you mix her and her little sword cutting or side cutting of the sandbags, Wake Me Up Inside, is that Evanescence?
Heck yes, it is. One of two Evanescence songs.
Yes. And then you get some rockin' songs that go through, and then you get to the credits, and you let the credits roll, because I was kind of working on dinner, and I had to let the credits roll and stuff. There's some great little, 2003, absolutely transports you to that sound, that time, rockin' songs that are going on, that are very... the end of grunge, alternative style kind of music, and I was like, "Well, this is just quite a soundtrack they put together and made it for the movie." So,
yeah,
and then House of Pain is in here.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I made a list of all the pop songs, which I'll get to in a second.
I absolutely love Colin Farrell in here, and the moment House of Pain came on, I was like, "Yes, this is Colin Farrell. This is exactly who we need on here."
It fits beautifully. Yeah. What I do want to touch just real quickly, because before I will forget otherwise, is that there is one really great leitmotif that I do like. It's called Young Matt's Father, and it's the one with the soft piano theme that you hear early on in the film, and then you hear it when adult Matt touches the boxing gloves as an apartment, and then at the end when he drops that final rose off the roof of the Olympic. And it's only played like 3 times. It's played once when he's younger, and then the 2 other times. And it's beautiful, it's haunting, it's melancholy, and it's a very nice piece of work there. But yeah, so the 2003, the unabashedly 2003 soundtrack. You've got Hoobastank, you've got Seether playing diegetic when Matt wakes up and turns on his stereo as loud as he can. I'm assuming to help him, quote unquote, see in the apartment. I don't know. You mentioned Jump Around by House of Pain, which again is diegetic. That's in the bar there. You got The Man Without Fear by Drowning Pool featuring Rob Zombie as Bullseye is riding the motorcycle through the streets there. The end credits, you've got Fuel, you got The Calling, you got Revis. You mentioned you got the 2 Evanescence songs, Bring Me to Life during the training montage, and then My Immortal during the funeral. And I remember when that came out, I did not, and it was a surprise to hear that was the same band, because those songs are so very different. But and I did mention this when we did Spider-Man, that there would be a return of Nickelback, and there is Nickelback's Learn the Hard Way during the fight scene that we talked about earlier, and the way that keeps coming in and out with the sound design, with the fan and the bullets, and
gosh,
brilliant. I love that so much. I'm getting chills just thinking about how well that's just interspersed in those ways there.
Of all the movies we've talked about, this one, I feel like this has a huge variety of the time, pop culture wise, everybody in here. Like, you mix a lot. So, but then to still have the little angelic sounds, like when his dad's death scene is going on, it's almost like this angelic sound of rising up, and Murdoch's now going to have to be a hero. Anyway, it's a good soundtrack, good sounds throughout the whole thing. So,
and I was thinking, that was the norm for a while. I mean, I remember Batman Forever had a soundtrack, and Batman and Robin had a soundtrack, and the MCU kind of brought that to a stop, right? There wasn't music from and inspired by the film. That's not really a thing anymore.
Well,
for superhero films, I mean,
this was 2003, and this is when Columbia House was still doing their 15 CDs for a penny.
Sure.
And I still have never paid them back, but I was buying CDs around this time, and so the soundtracks were songs that they were still pushing for soundtracks back then. And I don't think you get that anymore, since Columbia House never got their money and didn't make it. So now we don't have soundtracks.
Well, that's true. People aren't buying whole albums worth of music anymore.
No,
for the most part. One other thing that I thought was fun is there's actually, and I know it's a controversial scene, doesn't bother me at all, but the playground fight scene has a remix called the Blind Justice remix. That's the Daredevil theme that's playing there as well. So there is that leitmotif that runs through. Again, that's probably the most memorable version of it.
Okay, yeah, you bring that up. I had that up here in my depth of plot, that the playground fight scene is good. Humorous, clever meetup, but the location is very cheesy. We're just going to go have a fight right here in a schoolyard, and kids are going to stand at the fence and go, fight, fight, fight. It's oh my gosh, come on.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people have trouble with, that, the tone ranging from dark and gritty to that.
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
it is what
plucky.
it is.
There's plucky.
Plucky. I do like, last thing I'll note is just the vocal sounds that we have Matt Murdock's narration of the origin story, which I also love, Corey, that you get Daredevil in his prime and almost near the end of his career. At least that's how it first appears, right? And then you just get, here's my quick little flashback, and that works. Even though we didn't know the character, you didn't need to spend a ton of time building up who he is. And then they've even cut out stuff. Because again, knowing that character from Spider-Man, the cartoon, which is super comic accurate, I'm looking like, where's Stick, the guy that's supposed to teach him? And Stick doesn't even show up until Elektra for some reason. But he's in there. He's in the Netflix show though, so it's a minor spoiler for that. But
I think the vocal sounds in this between Michael Duncan's voice and Ben Affleck's voice being very raspy and deep and throaty, I thought it was good. It just adds an element. And those two together have such chemistry. They were in Armageddon, which I think is a fantastic movie. I know.
Love Armageddon.
We talked about that in a few podcasts ago. Go check that out. But those two have such a chemistry together that it works so well. And I loved it. So I think Michael Duncan, I'm just going to say this right now, he was a perfect casting for Kingpin.
Let's go ahead and transition down into that. I think that's a natural transition. Yeah. Keep talking about that. Yeah.
Well, because I think he was such a perfect character for this role. And I haven't seen the new Daredevil. I don't know the new guy. I've seen him in other movies.
You have.
And he's a great actor. But when I think of Kingpin, I think nobody has done it as well as Michael Duncan did. And it's a shame he's not around, but he would have been a fantastic Kingpin in any movie. So,
yeah, I mean, I know there was some talk about, and he's done some vocal work in Spider-Man animated stuff. But again, we've been talking about this could have easily been in the same universe, and Kingpin originally was a Spider-Man villain, and so he could have faced off against Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man very, very easily. We could have had a crossover, super easy.
But the level of cast that we have in this movie, let's talk about how deep this goes.
I mean, you already started talking about Colin Farrell, and he's super melodramatic, like way over the top, but it absolutely works.
Okay,
in my opinion,
I gotta bring up him coming up the escalator. I don't think that's in the theatrical cut.
It's not,
because I will no longer ride an escalator like I have ever ridden an escalator before. I will only do it the way he does, like ascending as an angel up the escalator. Like after
arms outstretched.
After he had just killed some guy with a bunch of toothpicks right in his throat. Like he was just absolutely perfect in this movie. I loved Colin Farrell, and I think he got hate on this movie. I don't think he was liked in this role, if I remember right. Like it was kind of like, but I think he was so fantastic, and I absolutely think he was a great cast for this. And I will never ride an escalator the same.
I mean, say what you want. I just love Jennifer Garner, so I cannot be objective about that. I think she's good as Elektra. I'm just going to put that there. But what I do love, and I think is objectively amazing, is the chemistry between Ben Affleck and Jon Favreau.
Oh, yeah.
Every scene that those guys are in, I am so entertained. And so when I went to look at dialogue, it was like another one of their exchanges, a lot of which are saved in the director's cut, which I mean, just keep harping on. It's such a better movie. Watch that one, people.
Jon Favreau must get some more screen time on here, because he is great, and they do work together so well. They're very quippy together. I will say this. There was one point where they're having breakfast, and he says, "Your client made a payment," and Ben Affleck says to him, "Oh, that's very good. You should be happy." And so in my mind, I thought, "Oh my gosh, he's happy from the MCU." So maybe this is where that came from. Like, you should be happy. So
some of it is. I mean, it's the beginning of Favreau's relationship with Marvel Studios. So we are seeing in some very tangible ways the origins of the MCU. Yeah. But Corey, did you have specific lines that you wanted to talk about? We'll just do two, just for the sake of time.
Just two.
Yeah.
I did like, and I felt like this was a little over the top, but I did like the line, was when Ben Affleck is in court and the first guy's getting away for a pretty gritty little charge. I mean, that was, oh my gosh, that's pretty dark to throw in a movie. For your sake, I hope justice is found today before justice finds you. And I was like, that's not a threat right there. I mean, if you were sitting in the courtroom, you'd been like, dang, he just got threatened. We're done.
So. Yeah. I mean, because the follow-up to that, I'll just jump into that. Like later on when they meet again. He's Daredevil now in the
Yeah.
in the train station, and people think this isn't good, but I think it's amazing. And he says, "Hey, that light at the end of the tunnel, guess what? That's not heaven. That's the C train."
I think that's fantastic. That was a great one.
But I wanted to go ahead.
He kills in this one, so
yes,
I mean,
I wanted to talk about that because again, I love director's commentary. It's been a while since I've watched a really good one. Mark Steven Johnson talks about that and the fact that he even now is not sure if he likes the fact that and he's the writer as well, that had Daredevil let Quesada die, named after a comic book artist, of course, Quesada. But what he said, what's important is that if you keep it that way, then that makes Daredevil not killing Kingpin at the end important.
Yes.
So you have to have that moment where he has because it's not hero's journey, which we'll talk about a little bit, but it is a little bit of this transformation of him kind of redefining what his mission is. And he says it multiple times, when he has the thing with he beats up the guy and then in front of the guy's kid, I'm not the bad guy. And then at the end where he's kind of reaffirming, I'm not the bad guy. That's
he
why
had to have a growth.
Yep. So it's character growth.
Craig,
so
that's
for
brilliant.
that, I know. Well, I'm not the one that came up with it, but
I'm giving you credit.
So I applaud that. Yes, it is brutal that happened, but I think it's also interesting that you can have that character growth in a 2-hour movie.
It makes it more pointed, especially when he tells Elektra, getting vengeance won't make you feel any better. It doesn't help.
Yes.
And so because then you get that midpoint and then you get the end point.
Yeah.
So that's a really good take on that, I think. And that's the problem. We sometimes get into this, well, there's a no-kill rule. They can't kill anybody. And it's kind of like, okay, well, there has to be. And my point when he was standing over top of him, I thought it was that line from, I can't even think of what it is now on the spot, but he was like, I don't have to kill you, but I don't have to save you.
Oh, Batman Begins. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Batman Begins. Yeah.
He murders tons of people inadvertently, blows up Ra's al Ghul's house, and all those guys are dead. And he kills Ra's al Ghul by causing the accident and then leaving.
Oh, yeah. I don't have to kill you, but I don't have to save you either.
Yeah,
so.
Nolan's Batman Kills too. We'll get to those in the spring. I think that'll be fun.
Yes.
Any other? I have so many lines. So any other lines that you want to talk about?
And I thought this when she said it because I did not remember the last name. When Matt Murdock's talking to Foggy about meeting Elektra, and he says her name's Elektra Nachos, and he says, "Well, she sounds like a Mexican appetizer."
I knew you were going there. I love it so much.
He goes, "It's Greek, genius. Her father's Nicholas Nachos, the billionaire." Anyway. That whole scene, I lost it at that part, Craig. I rewound it. I was like, are you kidding me? She sounds like a Mexican appetizer. Like, just the way they delivered that was pretty good. So,
yeah.
Jon Favreau.
I'm only going to quote one more, but I do want to point out just one more thing. Again, I'm just going to keep coming back to the difference. This is the thing that's interesting, I think, with the difference between the two cuts. And I felt this way with the Snyder cut of Justice League as well, that as much as I absolutely love Zack Snyder's Justice League, and that is far and away the best version, there are certain elements of the theatrical cut that I miss that weren't Snyder's stuff. They were Joss Whedon stuff. Like, I really do love Aquaman sitting on Wonder Woman's lasso. Like, scrap I want to do. That whole bit is so good. I missed that part. But the thing that's different with this one that I wanted to talk about that I'm missing is that in the theatrical cut, there's a whole lot more, or it's different, with the priest. Like, he goes to confession. The priest knows that he's Daredevil throughout the film, whereas in the director's cut, he doesn't find out until Matt Murdock comes down and then he takes his mask off. That's the only time that he finds out. So you have these great, because all the other interchanges I think are just amazing. There's the thing about he's doing confession and finally he's like, all right, he says that may God have mercy on you, and then he's like, and I'm not too crazy about the outfit either. I love that. He's like, yeah, I get what you're doing and you need to do it, but then he makes a comment about the fact that he's dressed like the devil, which I think is great.
And he says, I don't like your outfit.
Yeah, love that.
Yes, but I'm looking at that quote right here, and it was such a good, because he makes a comment and says, you're not here for confession, you're here for vengeance.
Yes.
Like, he's like, you want permission. And that was a whole great, I agree with you there. Like, it's better if the priest knows. I
want both of those versions. And I get, again, it's the whole thing where the priest doesn't know. And so he knows Matt, but he doesn't know that Matt is Daredevil. But the last one that I want to talk about, it's not a big one, but I love it every time I see it, and it's Ben Urich at the very end who has this whole, and you get to see again a lot more in the director's cut that he is the Daredevil story is he's working on two, like who's the Kingpin, who's Daredevil, and he gets all the way to the end, and he's gonna, he's got this great story, and he's gonna break it, and then he deletes it and changes his mind because he knows that what Daredevil is doing is super important, and that he'd be putting bad guys back on the street if he breaks that story. And so when he looks up him at the end and just goes, "Go get him, Matt." Every time I just
I didn't like it.
I love it so much because he's just like nod and he's like, "I'm gonna go kick some ass. Let's do it."
I thought
you don't like that?
I don't like that line because I thought of Spider-Man 2 where she goes, "Go get him, Tiger." I immediately was like,
Corey, you're killing
"Okay,
me.
Kristen Dunst, let's go." I felt like that was predictable.
Spider-Man 2, though. Yes. I just love it.
I knew that's where he was going to go. I'm telling the story, and Matt's like, "Then I'm finished." And then he gets there, and he has it written out, and I knew it was like, delete. I knew he was going to. But he has to. It's part of the story. It's part of the building. It's like, okay, everybody coming around and realizing, I've got the story, but now I need to kind of sit on it and go with it because I know this is, same role as the priest. The priest knows the whole time, like kind of thing. They just have to know, and they keep that secret because you have to. So
yeah, we're running a little long here, so I'm going to just fly through a couple of things. One thing that I really thought was interesting this time is that I think Johnny Depp is borrowing a little bit from Bullseye and some of the the twitchies in the eyes.
Yeah,
a little bit. That looked a little familiar. Somebody else talked about this too. I think Justin might have mentioned this, and he just looks like his internet is not working tonight. So one thing he did point out that I want to make sure we mention too is when Elektra puts up her umbrella to hide herself, that motion, there's no dialogue there, but that is heartbreaking that she is shutting him out. And as Avi Arad mentions in the commentary, like she's going to the dark side, like literally in dark, metaphorically in dark there as well. I really do like the cataract milky blue contacts that they have for Ben Affleck to make him look blind. I think those are cool. I didn't notice until high definition's amazing, right? Like there's scarring around his eyes. I had never seen that before, and I've only watched this on DVD up until recently. I'd never seen that until high definition comes around. The costume, which I think is really interesting, more utilitarian. It's not very superhero-y, but it's James Acheson, who's the guy who did the Spider-Man costume from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and who also did Man of Steel, which is, I love that costume. But both very, they don't feel like they're necessarily real world costumes. There's something very supernatural about them almost.
Yes.
They don't feel very grounded, which is why I like them. They're very alien, I guess is kind of what I'm going for. But this is not. It's like motorcycle riding gear is essentially what it is. The strap around his neck serves a purpose. Like it's loose most of the time, and then he gets hit with the collection plate, and then he buckles that sucker back up.
And when you look at the suit 2015 versus suit 2003, three suits were very leathery, even in X-Men, leathery and kind of, like you said, motorcycle riding versus now where it's very textured, very carbon looking and strength and mobility. So,
yeah. And then just a couple of little things, like it's very subtle. A part of it because of the desaturation is that Affleck has reddish hair. He's a ginger in this.
Yeah.
As is Matt Murdock, he's more ginger here than he is in the Netflix series. And it's not nearly as obnoxious as Kirsten Dunst's red hair. That just looks fake.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Jennifer Garner has green contacts in this. That's not her natural color of eye. I'm waiting to see. It's been a while since I've seen Elektra, so I'm going to see if they carry that through. And I don't think they carry that through in Deadpool and Wolverine, but I'm going to check that out this week and see. I don't think they did. That's, again, tiny insignificant detail, except for they make a big deal of the close-up on her face when she walks into the restaurant the first time. So
yeah.
And then, Bullseye's outfit is not comic accurate at all, but I don't care. It's amazing. He's got that forehead scar, the alligator skin coat. It's ridiculous. It's over the top, and even still, he wants an effing costume.
Yeah.
Which you're wearing one already, but I love that
I think the head scar is kind of cool on him. Colin Farrell, I just love that man. That guy can do anything. So I tell you.
Yeah. Are you watching Penguin at all?
No, I have not. I'm waiting until it comes out so I can binge it. I saw the Batman. I thought he was great in it. I was blown away by him. I learned something about him. He has a special needs son, and I saw an interview with him just today that happened to pop up where he was talking about the sad part about being older and when he passes away and his son and having to, and trying to set him up in what he dreams for. And it was so heartfelt and so touching that I looked at Colin Farrell different. I was like, holy cow, this is a man that knows some things. So
seems like really a genuinely good guy.
Like when you step back and you see these guys out of their roles and you're like, wow, that guy's a jerk or a pompous, but this guy, you're like, and I'm sure maybe he is on some things, and he's had some run-ins, but at this point I was like, wow, that is, this guy's got some levels to him.
Yeah. I'm going to quickly skip down to setting and design. A lot of this is Los Angeles, actually. The Olympic Auditorium with the boxing ring, that's in LA. The Biltmore Hotel is where we have the black and white ball, which you mentioned earlier. Matt Murdock's apartment is the Arcade Building on South Broadway. The ye old King's Head is in Los Angeles. That's Bullseye's English pub, which in one version of the story is actually set in New York. And so before he gets on the plane where things are different. So that's funny to see how those things are switched around. And then he steals the motorcycle after that as opposed to right before he kills Nicholas Nachos. And then the church, the First Congressional Church of Los Angeles, is also in Spider-Man 2. So we'll be looking for that when that shows up. And that's the church from National Treasure. So that's why that looks so familiar.
There's cameos there. Listen, Craig, do you think that there's a little touch of Spider-Man hint universe in here with the alligators in the sewer comment?
I love that. I wish that was true. I hope it's true.
In my mind, I'd love to.
In my headcanon, that is now true.
Yeah, like make it, because he alludes to alligators in the sewer, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there it is. We can do it.
Dr. Connors is he's in Spider-Man 2. Yep.
So in my head, the comic cartoon that we used to watch in the 90s, that where they team up in the 90s, and could be.
And as I'm saying that, like, not only is Dr. Connors in Spider-Man 2, he's mentioned by name in Spider-Man 1. So we know he exists in that universe. So that could have been him. Let's see. So a couple other things. I mentioned the boxing gloves hanging in Daredevil's apartment from his dad, I think is pretty great. All of his Daredevil gear, which I'm wondering who made that for him.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he makes a decent living as a lawyer, but even still, how does a blind guy get all that stuff? I don't know. It's still good. So the good. Movie can happen. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
All the water in Kingpin's offices, I think, is fascinating. I love that it's set up there, and that you probably should figure out that that's foreshadowing, but that comes in really handy in the final fight, and I love that you get that flash into.
It was a good setup.
Elektra in the rain, yes. The payoff.
The payoff I love.
Yep. Final things I have just for props. I love that he has that cane/baton/grappling hook all put together, which turns out to be, again, it becomes a plot point. I love when things serve multiple purposes. That's how Ben Urich finds out that Matt's Daredevil.
Yes. I do wonder how much cable he's got wrapped in that, because he jumps off the building at the end credits, and I thought, that's like Spider-Man's webbing.
Yeah.
I was like, how much wrap of cable do you have in just that little cage?
A lot. I also really enjoy the fact that he has to sleep in a sensory deprivation chamber. Like, I feel bad for him, but I think that's, as much as this movie is fantasy in a lot of ways, like, that's a very realistic way. I love the way that they portray that. Like, he has to find a way to shut off the world. Otherwise, he's on high alert all the time.
Yes.
And I also want to just one last thing. There's a lot of Heineken product placement in this one. And Elektra's size, which are a super cool weapon. There is a scene in, I can't remember which season of Alias it is, but it's after this where she does use those in a little bit of a flare. And so you're like, see, she's Elektra too, and it happens later, so that's fun.
See, that does. Well, and they throw the little, at the end, just the foreshadow with, he finds his little necklace with the braille thing on it, and so, like, she's not dead. So...
Yeah, I've heard
about
that.
And it sets up the Elektra movie, which I have never seen the Elektra movie. So
interesting. Watching them in this order, and there's some that you guys haven't seen, so that's fun. Looking at characters, seeing if there's anybody we haven't talked about yet. I mean, we've mentioned Ben Urich, but that's Joe Pantoliano, who's great in everything that he's in. Like, that's a guy who I always enjoyed, even though I didn't know who he was. So it's like, that's the guy that's one of Tommy Lee Jones's guy from The Fugitive, among many, 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 many other things.
Yeah.
He's great as Ben Urich in this.
Yeah, he's kind of a cheesy actor, I think, but I like him. Her father, I think, the Eric Avari, the guy, he's fresh off The Mummy from this, right? Like, he was great in The Mummy. That
sounds right, yeah.
And I loved him in that movie. I love him in several movies. He's been great in a lot of these movies. So
yeah, a lot of guys that you recognize
Kevin Smith
and don't know
has
the
a
names.
cameo.
Yes, he does.
We see we got also our Stan Lee cameo.
Yep.
Early on with young Matt Murdock saving him from getting hit by a bus. There's some good solid names throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, another cameo, Frank Miller, who wrote some very, very important Daredevil runs. He's credited as Man with Pen and Head. That is the one that Bullseye steals his motorcycle right before he takes on Nachos. But yeah, like Leland Orser plays Wesley Owen Welch. He's a guy that you've seen in lots of different stuff. Much more important in the director's cut. He's the guy who basically, cuts a deal and gets them and helps get Kingpin. Ellen Pompeo from Grey's Anatomy is in this, just in a tiny little role as Karen Page. Much more in the director's cut as well. I always forget that she's in this. Was
Vincent D'Onofrio in this movie?
Vincent D'Onofrio plays Kingpin in the Netflix
right,
series.
But I'm looking up IMDb and it's saying he's in this one, and I was okay, this must be a mix of something then.
That's a mix of stuff.
Okay,
that's the wrong one. Paul Ben Victor plays Jose Quesada, who again is named after Joe Quesada, who's a comic book artist. And of course Coolio is in the director's cut, which he's really good in it.
Yeah, he did. He did
Dante
pretty good.
Jackson, he's very good in it, and and that's what I think. There's a lot of funny stuff with him too, just kind of awkward in the Favreau in court when Matt Murdock is missing and he's trying to read his notes and they're in Braille and that whole bit, which I think it's funny but not out of place. And so you have tonally, I think it makes a lot of sense. So you miss some levity, but you also miss the thing with Matt interrogating the cop who has the pacemaker and all those things. Guys, if you haven't seen the director's cut of Daredevil, I know this is going to sound cliche, but then you haven't really seen the movie, not the way that it was intended to be, and it's a much, much better film. And as many comic book movies as we've seen over the years, I think this movie holds up really, really well.
Yes. I would say you go back and watch the director's cut now and you'll be like, oh man, I forgot how good this movie was. You watch the theater cut, you'll be like, oh, it's kind of rushed.
Yeah. I'm just looking to see if there's anything we haven't talked about. We talked about Hero's Journey, that's not really that. It does give us the origin story we talked about, but it's kind of wedged in there as a flashback. It's really, like I said, it's more about a man rediscovering his faith, which you have that a little bit. Almost made it to church, Matthew. There's that, and I can't remember. Is that in the theatrical? I'm getting it mixed up.
I don't know if it is, but at this one, that's at the end there where he says it to him.
I think that's the director's cut. Yeah, you almost made it to that, and then of course, trying to stay on the moral high ground as a vigilante, trying to find that balance.
Well, and then to point out, like you said, where he kills in the beginning, and he says at the end, "I'm not the bad guy," and he doesn't kill Kingpin.
Yeah.
Who, by all means, he could have been vengeful and killed him because he killed his father. So, I mean. Yep. Yeah.
We forget that, I think. You go through, he's trying to take down Kingpin, and then there is that thing of, get that information that he's the guy. He finds that out right before, right?
Yeah. You see the beauty of it when we don't have to spend a whole time on this origin discovery of powers, but we kind of build up the character of who this guy is with that. He's rising above even a level that he's been. He's been known and established Daredevil already, but he had to rise above to become truly a superhero. So, that's a great story, better than an origin story.
Yeah. And as far as world building goes, we kind of talked about this. It's pretty grounded. There's not a lot of fantastical stuff in this one, other than superhero senses after getting blasted with nuclear waste or whatever.
Yeah.
But pretty grounded for the most part. And then I'm just looking down, kind of moving down to final thoughts. There was one thing I wanted to talk about, and then I'm going to just give you the floor on that. Was it got a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes when it came out. But anytime you've got theatrical versus director's cut, I wonder, that score seems like that would have been different, because probably a lot of things that you're complaining about are fleshed out. There's the story is put back in when you watch the director's cut. But even still, there was a quote that I saw, and I'm just going to paraphrase at this point, but on the 20th anniversary of the film, Mark Steven Johnson looked back and said he tried to do too much with this one, that he would have preferred to just kind of have it be a lot more lean, but he put in Bullseye and Foggy, and you could do it without Elektra too. Like, you could have gone the Karen Page way, but there's a lot in this film.
Yeah.
So, Corey, what are some of your final thoughts on Daredevil?
I think it's a great movie. I think it's another example of a short origin story and the building of a character, how it matters, I think, to audiences. I think you look back at the Rotten Tomato scores you just talked about versus now, like with the director's cut, you watch it. The director's cuts seem to be better. They flesh out the things that become big things that people complain about in theater versions. So I think the characters in this movie are absolutely fantastic. Some top-notch actors and stellar chemistry between them that is very believable. And I think that right there helps to build a world where you just kind of get pulled in for a little over 2 hours. And I was real happy with it. I think this is definitely a good movie. Is it a movie I'll go back to? I mean, maybe once in a while. I might watch it with my kid. I don't know. I have not seen the new Daredevil because I kind of liked it before, but after watching the director cut, I really like this Daredevil character. So it'll be hard for me to relinquish the reins to someone else and say, okay, do this, and that's not how I like it, So, but I think this also cements that Ben Affleck is a stellar actor in these roles, and let's just say he would have been a phenomenal Batman. If they would have just given him a couple more movies, he would have just moved through that. Because I mean, to go from Daredevil and Batman and have me as in your corner saying, man, you are just stellar in these roles, and the fights and everything are very believable, not hokey with you. So I mean, he's got a next level.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that. I agree. I unabashedly love this movie, and even though I'd seen it many times, I hadn't seen it in a while. So watching it this time, I was like, I'd forgotten how much I enjoy this movie. I really do like this movie, unironically. But the Affleck thing, it was a rough experience for him. I mean, you can't forget about that part. He won a Golden Raspberry Award for this. The critics were not kind for him, and this is the thing that kind of burned him on. That's why they didn't come. That's one of the reasons they didn't do a sequel for this. He does show up in a cameo in a deleted scene in Elektra, and we'll see if that shows up in the director's cut or not. But it's also kind of the reason that we do get him for Batman. You don't get him as Batman if you don't do this. I think in a lot of ways, just to kind of cleanse the palate, he had to go back and do it right. And so, taking that experience into, Zack Snyder's take on Batman, I think is worthwhile.
Well, and I think it's a shame that both movies he's done, you look at director's cuts versus studio cuts, and that's just a shame because you're like, Ben Affleck, how'd you get... I mean, to get two good roles in your life, and both times, the director's cuts, absolutely phenomenally different movies than what was released to the theater. Yeah. So.
I agree. So we're going to go ahead and close, and we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on X, Instagram, and Facebook. Email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com, or use the SpeakPipe app on our website. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and review us on iTunes or Spotify. And don't forget, you have a special offer right now from Magic Mind. You have a limited offer that gets you up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off one-time purchases with code RBTR at checkout. You can claim it at magicmind.com/RBTR20. And our next film, Corey, in our series, Marvel Before the MCU, will be X2, X-Men United. Send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from X2, and we'll share it on the next episode.